So over dinner, the husband says to his wife, "According to the neighborhood gossip, the mailman has managed to sleep with every woman on our block but one." The wife barely reacts. "I bet it's that ugly Susan Parker in number 12. So an old redneck couple, Billy and Sally, were at home doing the gardening. Billy looks over to Sally and says, "Sally, I think your butt is bigger than the barbecue." Sally rolls her eyes and says, "Whatever, Billy, just plant the dang tomatoes," and turns away. Billy, however, is so curious to test his theory that he walks over to the barbecue, measures it with his hands, then walks over to Sally and compares this measurement to her butt. Then he exclaims, "See, I told you, Sally. Your butt is bigger than the barbecue. I measured it." Sally ignores her silly husband and continues weeding. Later that night, they both jump into bed. Billy turns over and nudges Sally on the shoulder and says, "Hey, Sally, come on, the Viagra's kicked in." Sally looks at Billy and, with an annoyed voice, replies, "What? You want me to fire up a whole barbecue for one little sausage?" So a 90-year-old man goes for a physical, and all of his tests come back normal. The doctor says, "Larry, everything looks great. How are you doing mentally and emotionally? Are you at peace with God?" Larry replies, "God and I are tight. He knows I have poor eyesight, so he's fixed it. So when I get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, poof, the light goes on. When I'm done, poof, the light goes off." "Wow, that's incredible," the doctor says. A little later in the day, the doctor calls Larry's wife. "Bonnie," he says, "Larry is doing fine. But I had to call you because I'm in awe of his relationship with God. Is it true that he gets up during the night and poof, the light goes on in the bathroom, and when he's done, poof, the light goes off?" "Oh, sweet Jesus," exclaims Bonnie. "He's peeing in the refrigerator again." So while on a road trip, an elderly couple stopped at a roadside restaurant for lunch. After finishing their meal, they left the restaurant and resumed their trip. When leaving, the elderly woman unknowingly left her glasses on the table, and she didn't miss them until they had been driving for about 40 minutes. By then, to add to the aggravation, they had to travel quite a distance before they could find a place to turn around in order to return to the restaurant to retrieve her glasses. All the way back, the elderly husband became the classic grouchy old man. He fussed and complained and scolded his wife relentlessly during the entire return drive. The more he chided her, the more agitated he became. He just wouldn't let up for a single minute. To her relief, they finally arrived at the restaurant. As the woman got out of the car and hurried inside to retrieve her glasses, the old geezer yelled to her, "While you're in there, you might as well get my hat and the credit card." So two cannibals, a father and son, were chosen by the tribe to go out and find something to eat. They ventured deep into the jungle and waded by a path. Before long, a little old man came along. The son looked at him and said, "Oh, Dad, there's one." "No," said the father. "There's not enough meat on that one to even feed the dogs. We'll wait." A little while later, a very fat man approached. The son said, "Hey, Dad, he's plenty big enough." "No," the father replied. "We'd all die of a heart attack from the fat in that one. We'll wait." About an hour later, a stunningly beautiful woman appeared. The son said, "Now there's nothing wrong with that one, Dad. Let's eat her." "No," said the father. "We won't eat her either." "Why not?" asked the son. "Because, "We're going to take her back alive and eat your mother," the father replied. So a new manager spends a week at his new office with the manager he is replacing. On the last day, the departing manager tells him, "I have left 3 numbered envelopes in the desk drawer. Open an envelope if you encounter a crisis you can't solve." 3 months down the track, there is major drama. Everything goes wrong, the usual stuff, and the manager feels very threatened by it all. He remembers the parting words of his predecessor and opens the first envelope. The message inside says, "Blame your predecessor." He does this and gets off the hook. About half a year later, the company is experiencing a dip in sales, combined with serious product problems. The manager quickly opens the second envelope. The message read, "Reorganize." This he does, and the company quickly rebounds. 3 months later, at his next crisis, he opens the third envelope. The message inside says, "Prepare 3 envelopes." So a happy 90-year-old man walked into the doctor's office. He was all smiles and laughed with the nurses and staff until they brought him in to see the doctor. The doctor examined him and told him he should start eating better because his health was not in that great a shape. The old man was surprised. He said to his doctor, "I've never felt better. I have an 18-year-old bride who is pregnant with my child. What do you think about that?" The doctor considered his question for a minute and then said, "I have an elderly friend who is a hunter and never misses a season. One day, when he was going out in a bit of a hurry, he accidentally picked up his umbrella instead of his gun. When he got to the creek, he saw a rabbit sitting beside the stream. He raised his umbrella and went bang, bang, and the rabbit fell dead. What do you think of that?" The 90-year-old said, "I'd say somebody else killed that rabbit." The doctor smiled. "My point exactly." So a scrawny little guy walks into the office of a lumber camp looking for a job. Boss looks him over and says, "Get the hell out of here. Our axes weigh more than you do." The guy begs and pleads with the boss and says he can show him he's worth hiring. Both men go outside and the boss points to a little 1-foot-around tree and says, "All right, let's see you chop that down." The little dude swings the axe twice and down the tree goes. Boss says, "That's okay. Now, see that 5-foot diameter tree? Let's see if you can chop that one down." So the little guy picks up the axe and 10 chops later the tree falls. The boss exclaims, "That's amazing. Where did you learn to do that?" The little guy replies, "The Sahara forest." Now the boss was a bit confused and asked, "Don't you mean the Sahara Desert?" Little guy shrugs his shoulders and said, "Sure. It is now." So, a sexually active woman tells her plastic surgeon that she wanted her bottom lips reduced in size because they were too loose and floppy. Out of embarrassment, she insisted that the surgery be kept a secret, and the surgeon agreed. Awakening from the anesthesia, after the surgery she found 3 roses carefully placed beside her on the bed. Outraged, she immediately calls in the doctor. "I thought I asked you not to tell anyone about my operation." The surgeon told her he had carried out her wish for confidentiality, and that the first rose was from him. "I felt sad because you went through this all by yourself. The second rose is from my nurse. She assisted me in the surgery and empathized because she had had the same procedure done some time ago." "And what about the third rose?" she asked. "That's from a man upstairs in the burn unit. He wanted to thank you for his new ears." So George came home from university in tears. "Mom, am I adopted?" "No, of course not." replied his mother. Why would you think such a thing? George showed her his genealogy DNA test results. No match for any of his relatives, and strong matches for a family who lived the other side of the city. Perturbed, his mother called her husband. Honey, George has done a DNA test, and, I don't know how to say this, he may not be our son. Well, obviously, he replied. What do you mean? She asked. It was your idea in the first place, her husband said. You remember that first night in hospital when the baby did nothing but scream and cry and scream and cry, on, and you asked me to change him. I picked a good one, I reckon. Ever so proud of George. So, an Englishman, an Irishman, and an American are stranded on an island until they find a genie. The genie explains to them that usually he'd give them 3 wishes, but because there's 3 people and they all found him equally, that everyone gets 1 wish. First, the Englishman makes his wish. Well, I've been stranded on this island for 2 years now, so I wish to go back home to my family in England. The genie grants his wish, and the Englishman disappears with a poof. Now, it's time for the American to make his wish. Well, I've been stranded on this island for 2 years as well, so I wish to go back home to my family in America. And the genie grants his wish, and the American disappears with a poof. Next, the Irishman makes his wish. Well, I'm real lonely on this island, so I wish my 2 buddies were back here with me. So 3 rednecks were working up on a cell phone tower, Cooter, Ronnie, and Donnie. As they start their descent, Cooter slips, falls off the tower, and is killed instantly. As the ambulance takes the body away, Ronnie says, Well, shucks. Someone should go and tell his wife. Donnie says, Okay, I'm pretty good at that sensitive stuff. I'll do it. 2 hours later, he comes back carrying a case of Budweiser. Ronnie says, Where did you get that beer, Donnie? Cooter's wife gave it to me, Donnie replies. That's unbelievable. You told the lady her husband was dead and she gave you beer? Well, not exactly, Donnie says. When she answered the door, I said to her, You must be Cooter's widow. She said, You must be mistaken. I'm not a widow. Then I said, I'll bet you a case of Budweiser you are. So deep in the backwoods of Tennessee, a hillbilly's wife went into labor in the middle of the night, and the doctor was called out to assist in the delivery. Since there was no electricity, the doctor handed the father to be a lantern and said, Here, you hold this high so I can see what I am doing. Soon, a baby boy was brought into the world. Wow, there, said the doctor. Don't be in such a rush to put that lantern down. I think there's another one coming. Sure enough, within minutes, he had delivered a baby girl. Hold that lantern up. Don't set it down. There's another one, said the doctor. Within a few minutes, he had delivered a 3rd baby. No, don't be in a hurry to put down that lantern. It seems there's yet another one coming, cried the doctor. The redneck scratched his head in bewilderment and asked the doctor, You reckon it might be the light that's attracting them? So a man from New York City found himself in a spot of bother after the IRS returned his tax return to him due to an incorrectly answered question. One of the questions on his tax return asked him to list his dependents. A few days later, they received the following response. 12.1 million illegal immigrants, 1.1 million crackheads, 4.4 million unemployed deadbeats, 80,000 criminals in over 85 prisons, at least 450 idiots in Congress, and numerous others who call themselves politicians, but are in fact nothing of the sort. In a strongly worded letter accompanying the man's tax return, the IRS responded saying, "This answer is completely unacceptable and an insult to this government institution." In turn, he replied, "I thought it was quite detailed. Who did I leave out?" So a group of 40-year-old friends formed a supper club, planning to reunite every decade for a great meal and to catch up. For their first gathering, they debated where to dine and finally agreed on Hooters because the waitresses wear low-cut tops. 10 years later, at 50, the group reconvened. After much discussion, they chose Hooters again, drawn by its tasty food and excellent beer selection. At 60, the friends met up and debated once more. They settled on Hooters for its peaceful, smoke-free atmosphere. A decade later, at 70, the group discussed their options and picked Hooters again, appreciating its senior discounts and wheelchair accessibility. Remarkably, at 80, the friends were all still around. They gathered, debated as usual, and decided on Hooters because they couldn't recall ever eating there before. So a doctor, a priest, and an engineer are playing a round of golf behind a group that's playing incredibly slow. They're waiting on every shot and getting more and more angry as the group in front of them is playing all over the course. When the marshal finally drives by, they unload their anger on him. The marshal sympathizes but says those guys are blind firefighters who lost their eyesight battling our clubhouse blaze last year. We let them golf for free to help compensate them for their loss. The priest says, "Good heavens, I feel terrible for saying all those terrible things about them. I'm going to say a special prayer for them at Mass next week." The doctor says, "I too feel just horrible. I'm going to reach out to my friend, who's an ophthalmologist, to see if he can help them." The engineer says, "So, why can't they play at night?" So Michael, a handsome man, walked into a sports bar around 9:58 p.m. He sat down next to this blonde at the bar and stared up at the TV as the 10:00 p.m. news came on. The news crew was covering a story of a man on a ledge of a large building preparing to jump. Michael says, "You know what? I bet he will." The blonde replied, "Well, I bet he won't." Michael placed $30 on the bar and said, "You're on." Just as the blonde placed her money on the bar, the guy did a swan dive off of the building, falling down. The blonde was very upset and handed her $30 to Michael, saying, "Fair's fair." "Here's your money." Michael replied, "I can't take your money. I saw this earlier on the 5 o'clock news and knew he would jump." The blonde replies, "I did too, but I didn't think he'd do it again." Michael took the money. So there's this forest, and a magical turtle lives in it. One day, he sees a bear chasing a rabbit, so he stops them and tells them that they can each have 3 wishes. For his first wish, the bear says that he wishes all the bears in this forest were female except for him. "Done," replied the turtle. The rabbit says, "I wish for a motorcycle." The turtle and bear are a bit confused, but the wish is granted anyway. For his second wish, the bear says, "I wish that all the bears in the neighboring forests were female except for me." "Done," replied the turtle. The rabbit wishes for a helmet. For his third wish, the bear says, "I wish that all the bears in the whole world were female except for me." "Done," replied the turtle. The rabbit says, "I wish that the bear was gay." And he jumps on his motorcycle and rides away. So a blonde lived with two blonde roommates. She bought a new car, and on the way home from the dealer got caught in a terrible hailstorm. Her brand new car was dented all over. When she got home, she called the service department to ask what she should do. They offer to send the car to a mechanic, but she'd have to pay for it. She tells them she has absolutely no money. Couldn't they just send someone anyway? The service chief, being a prankster, told her to wait till the car was cool and then blow hard on the tailpipe, which would pop out all the dents. A half hour later, her roomies saw her on her knees behind the car, blowing as hard as she could. They asked what the heck she was doing, and she told them she was trying to blow the dents out, but it's not working. "You dummy," one of her blonde roommates said. "You have to roll up the windows first." So a married couple was in a terrible accident, and the husband's face was severely burned. The doctor told him they couldn't graft any skin from his own body because he was too skinny. His wife lovingly offered to donate some of her own skin. However, the only suitable area was from her buttocks, a rather delicate matter. They both agreed to keep it a secret, and the doctor promised not to say a word. After the surgery, everyone was amazed by the man's transformation. He looked more handsome than ever. Friends and family couldn't stop complimenting his fresh, youthful face. One day, deeply moved, he said to his wife, "Dear, I just want to thank you for everything you did for me. How can I ever repay you?" She smiled and replied, "My love, I get all the thanks I need every time I see your mother kiss you on the cheek." So a guy at work offers a girl $1,000 to sleep with him. He says, "I'll drop the money on the floor. You bend down to pick it up, and I'll be finished before you even grab it." She tells her boyfriend, who thinks about it and says, "Go for it, but pick up the money really fast." An hour later, the boyfriend still hasn't heard from her, so he calls her on the phone. She finally answers, sounding exhausted. I can barely walk, let alone use the phone." "What happened?" he asks, panicking. She sighs. "He used $1 bills." So a college professor, an avowed atheist, was teaching his class. He shocked several of his students when he flatly stated he was going to prove there was no God. Addressing the ceiling, he shouted, "God, if you are real, then I want you to knock me off this platform. I'll give you 15 minutes." The lecture room fell silent. You could have heard a pin fall. 10 minutes went by. Again, he taunted God, saying, "Here I am, God. I'm still waiting." His countdown got down to the last couple of minutes when a Marine just released from active duty and newly registered in the class walked up to the professor, hit him full force in the face, and sent him tumbling from his lofty platform. The professor was out cold. At first, the students were shocked and babbled in confusion. The young Marine took a seat in the front row and sat silent. Eventually, the professor came to, shaken. He looked at the young Marine in the front row. When the professor regained his senses and could speak, he asked, "What's the matter with you?" "Why did you do that?" The Marine smiled and said, "God was busy, so he sent me." So a Jewish woman wants to take her dog to Israel, so she goes to the travel agent to find out how. He says, "It's easy. You go to the airline. They give you a kennel. You put your dog in it when you get off at Tel Aviv. Go to the luggage rack, and there's your dog." So she does. Gets off at Tel Aviv, goes to the luggage rack. No dog. She goes to the lost and found and says, "Where's my dog?" They look all over the airport for it and find the dog in another terminal. Only the dog is dead. "Oh my gosh," they say, We killed this woman's dog. What are we going to do? Then one says, wait a minute, it's a Cocker Spaniel. They're common dogs. There's a pet shop across the street from the airport. We'll get the same size, shape, color, sex. She'll never know the difference. They bring the woman the other dog, and she says, that's not my dog. Laughingly and making light of it, they say, what do you mean that's not your dog? And she says, my dog's dead. I was taking it to Israel to bury it. So the local church is doing a riverside baptism. There is a pretty long line of people waiting to be baptized by the river. A wandering drunk man sees the line, doesn't know what's going on, but decides to join in. When it's the drunk man's turn, he goes into the river, and the preacher grabs him, holds his nose, takes him under the water, brings him back up, and says to the drunk man, have you found Jesus? Drunk man says, no. The preacher gets a puzzled look on his face, grabs the drunk man, and takes him under again, holding him down for a few more seconds. He brings him back up and says a little more forcefully, have you found Jesus? Drunk man says, nope. The preacher is really flustered now, grabs the drunk, and really pulls him under the water, keeping him under for a long time. Finally, he pulls him up and screams at the drunk, have you found Jesus? The drunk man, spitting and sputtering, gasping for air, and when he gets his breath, replies to the preacher, are you sure this is where he fell in? So a blonde decides one day that she is sick and tired of all these blonde jokes and how all blondes are perceived as stupid. So she decides to show her husband that fact. While her husband is off at work, she decides that she is going to paint a couple of rooms in the house. The next day, right after her husband leaves for work, she gets down to the task at hand. Her husband arrives home at 5:30 and smells the distinctive smell of paint. He walks into the living room and finds his wife lying on the floor in a pool of sweat. He notices that she is wearing a ski jacket and a fur coat at the same time. He goes over and asks her if she is okay. I'm great, she replies. What are you doing? I wanted to prove to you that not all blonde women are stupid. So I painted the house. That's wonderful, honey. Thank you. He beams. Just one question, though. Why are you wearing your ski jacket over your fur coat? Well, I wanted to be thorough, and the directions on the paint can say, for best results, put on 2 coats. So a woman limped into the doctor's office, her face and arms covered in bruises. The doctor, a seasoned physician with a calm demeanor, looked up from his desk. Goodness, what happened to you? He asked. The woman sighed, wincing. Doc, I'm at my wit's end. Every time my husband comes home drunk on Bud Light, he beats me black and blue. The doctor leaned back, stroking his chin thoughtfully. I've got a fix for that, he said. Next time he comes home drunk, grab a glass of sweet tea and swish it in your mouth. Don't swallow. Just keep swishing until he passes out in his Bud Light haze. 2 weeks later, the woman strode back into the office, her face glowing, not a bruise in sight. Doctor, you're a genius, she exclaimed. Every time he came home drunk, I swished that sweet tea, and he didn't lay a finger on me. The doctor smiled slyly. You see how much keeping your mouth shut helps. So one day, 2 guys were driving to the grocery store to pick up some food. As they approached an intersection, the light turned red. The driver went right through the red light. The passenger, wide-eyed, yelled, "What the heck are you doing? You're gonna get us killed." The driver shrugged and said, "Relax. My mom always drives like this." A little later, they came to another red light, and once again, the driver blew right through it. The passenger, now furious, shouted, "I told you, you're gonna get us killed. Will you stop this madness?" The driver calmly repeated, "I told you already. My mom drives like this all the time." Then they reached another light. This time, it was green. But the driver suddenly slammed on the brakes and came to a complete stop. The passenger, now totally confused, screamed, "What the heck are you doing? It's a green light. Why'd you stop?" The driver pointed and said, "That's my mom's car coming over there." So an old sailor is setting his final affairs, and the only family he has left is two dumb blondes. So he goes to them and tells them that he wants to be buried at sea, and they agree. The old sailor finally passes, and the two blondes load his body into a rowboat and start sort. After they'd gone a little ways, one blonde says to stop rowing. She's going to check the depth. So she gets out of the rowboat, and the water is only up to her knees, so she tells the other blonde it's not deep enough, they need to go further out. So they go further out, and the blonde says she's going to check the depth, and this time the water comes up to her neck, and she tells the other blonde it's still not deep enough, and they need to go out more. So they go out some more, and again the blonde says she's going to check the depth. This time, she goes totally under and is out of sight for several seconds. When she comes up, she tells the other blonde, "This is deep enough. Hand me the shovel." So when Bob and Gloria were checking out of their hotel, Bob protested the amount of the bill. But the manager said that was the correct rate for the room and the free breakfast. "But we didn't eat the breakfast." "Well, it was there for your use," the manager said. "Well, then I'm going to have to charge you for making love to my wife." "I did no such thing," the manager protested, but to smooth things out, he agreed to reduce the bill. So, now Bob was celebrating his little victory and intended to use the same tactic again, which he did at their next stop. So the same sequence happened, with Bob again protesting the bill and saying that they passed up on the free breakfast. "But it was available for your use," the manager said. "Well," said Bob, "then I will have to charge you for making love with my wife." The manager's face went pale, and he stuttered. Okay, I'll pay you, but please keep this quiet. I don't want to lose my job." So, John came back from a safari in Africa. Upon arrival, he went to his friend, Mark, and told him of his adventures. "I was out in the jungle," he said, "when all of a sudden I heard a noise in the bush behind me. Looking back, I saw a huge lion licking his chops and smiling at me. The lion started coming my way, and I started running with the lion not far behind. When the lion was almost at my neck, he suddenly slipped, and I got ahead a bit. The lion started gaining on me again, and as he got closer, once again he slipped. I happened to see a house not far away, so I made for it. I got close to the house, with the lion almost on top of me, when he slipped for a third time. With my very last bit of strength, I ran into the house and closed the door in the lion's face." His friend said, "That's some story there, John. I would have crapped my pants." John smiled and replied, "Well, what do you think the lion kept slipping on?" So, three golfers had an important game with a client in Arizona. They were running late, and to make things worse, their car broke down. Luckily, they found a repair shop nearby. The mechanic told them it would take about 4 hours to fix the car, but then he added, "You're in luck. I've got a camel you can ride to the golf course." This camel's smart. It can read stoplights. It'll stop and go, just like a car. With no other option, the three golfers piled onto the camel, golf clubs and all, and took off. About an hour later, the mechanic saw them walking down the road, no camel in sight. He rushed over and asked, "What happened?" "And where's my camel?" One of the golfers replied, "Well, we stopped at a light, and a car pulled up next to us." The guy in the car stuck his head out the window and said, "Look at the three nuts on that camel." We got off to check, and the camel took off when the light turned green. So it was Sunday, and the preacher has just finished an inspiring church service when Rick, the wealthiest man in town, stood up and asked to address the congregation. The preacher wasn't surprised at this. "Just make it quick, Rick." He sighs. "Sure, Father," said Rick. He cleared his throat and addressed the audience. "I can still recall the day when I earned my first $1, he began. "That same evening, I attended a church meeting where the speaker talked about his humanitarian efforts. At that moment, I had only that single $1 to my name, and I had to make a tough decision. Give it to the speaker's cause, or keep it for myself. I chose to donate it all, and I truly believe that God blessed that decision, which is why I am a millionaire today." He finished, a tear gleaming in his eye. "Oh, yeah." An old woman in the audience shouted, "I dare you to do it again." So, a Mexican politician and an American politician are having dinner. They are eating at the American politician's house. A 6-bedroom house with a 2 Mercedes-Benz at the front and a 500-square-foot garden. The Mexican politician remarked how nice his house was and how he was able to afford it. The American politician said, "See that highway over there? It was meant to have 4 lanes instead of 3. A few months later, the Mexican politician invited the American over to his house down in Mexico. When the American arrived, he saw the Mexican had a 30-bedroom mansion, a lush orchard, and a massive garden with bodyguards and a Lambo, a Mercedes, a Porsche, and a few luxury trucks at the front. Awestruck, the American asked, "How could you afford all of this?" To which the Mexican replied, "See that bridge there?" Confused, the American said, "What bridge?" "Exactly," the Mexican said. So Bubba walked into a doctor's office, and the receptionist asked him what he had. Bubba said, "Shingles." So she wrote down his name, address, medical insurance number, and told him to have a seat. 15 minutes later, a nurse's aide came out and asked Bubba what he had. Bubba said, "Shingles." So she wrote down his height, weight, a complete medical history, and told Bubba to wait in the examining room. A half-hour later, a nurse came in and asked Bubba what he had. Bubba said, "Shingles." So the nurse gave Bubba a blood test, a blood pressure test, an electrocardiogram, and told Bubba to take off all his clothes and wait for the doctor. An hour later, the doctor came in and found Bubba sitting patiently in the nude and asked Bubba what he had. Bubba said, "Shingles." The doctor asked, "Where?" Bubba said, "Outside on the truck." "Where do you want me to unload them?" So a woman dies and goes to heaven. At the pearly gates, an angel says before you enter, you must spell a word. She says, "Okay, what word?" He says, "Love." She spells it and is granted entrance. She tells the angel, "I like that. Do you ever need help at the entrance gates?" The angel thinks about it, and he gives her the job. A short while later, because time doesn't exist in heaven, her husband appears at the gates. She says, "How was your life after I died?" He says, "Great. Remember my old secretary you were always jealous of? We started dating. We spent all your money, traveled the world, and had a great time together." She says, "Okay to enter heaven. You just need to spell one word." He says, "What word?" She grins and says, "Czechoslovakia." So a dinner speaker was rushing to his engagement. When he arrived and took his seat at the head table, he suddenly realized he'd forgotten his false teeth. He leaned over to the man next to him and whispered, "I forgot my teeth." The man smiled. "No problem." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of false teeth. "Try these." The speaker slipped them in. "Too loose," he said. The man nodded and pulled out another pair. "Try these." The speaker tested them. "Too tight." "Unfazed," the man said. "I've got one more pair, try these." The speaker grinned. Perfect. He enjoyed his meal and delivered his speech without a hitch. After the dinner, he went over to thank the man. "I really appreciate your help tonight. Where's your office? I've been looking for a good dentist." The man chuckled. "Oh, I'm not a dentist. I'm the local undertaker." So a man walked into his office with 2 black eyes. His co-workers were concerned and asked him what had happened. The man hesitated before finally confessing, "Well, it all started when I had to run some errands yesterday." He had just finished up at the grocery store and was feeling good about his efficient shopping when he noticed that the button on the fly of his pants had come loose. He tried to fix it himself, but his attempts only made it worse. Feeling embarrassed and not wanting to walk around with his pants undone, he thought of his neighbor across the hall, a married woman who was always willing to lend a hand. He went to her apartment and explained the situation. The woman was happy to help and invited him in. As she was sewing the button back on, they chatted and laughed. The man was starting to relax and forget about his embarrassing situation. But just as the woman was finishing up and leaning forward to cut the thread with her teeth, her husband walked in the door. So, first-year students at medical school were receiving their first anatomy class with a real human body. They all gathered around the surgery table with the body covered in a white sheet. The professor started the class by telling them, in medicine, it is necessary to have 2 important qualities as a doctor. The first is that you should not be disgusted by anything involving the human body. The professor pulled back the sheet, stuck his finger in the back of the corpse, withdrew it, and stuck it in his mouth. "Go ahead and do the same thing," he told his students. The students initially freaked out, hesitated for several minutes, but eventually took turns sticking a finger in the back of the corpse and sucking on it. When everyone finished, the professor looked at the class and told them, "The second most important quality is observation. I stuck in my middle finger, but sucked on my index finger. Now learn to pay attention." So a man in a bar, after several drinks, began bragging that he could identify any type of wood by its smell only. The patrons of the bar decided to test him. The man was blindfolded and presented with several pieces of wood. First, they tried maple. He smelled it and said, "That's maple." They then tried ebony. He again smelled it and named the wood correctly. He did this with every piece of wood they brought before him. The bartender then got an idea to trick him. They took one of the waitresses and put her crotch up to his nose. He sniffed for a while. "Boy," he said, "this is difficult. Flip that board over and let me smell the other side." So they took the waitress and put her rear near his nose. He took a big whiff, started to smile, and said, "You guys can't fool me. That's the shithouse door from a tuna boat." So an Illinois man left the icy streets of Chicago for a vacation in sunny Florida. His wife was on a business trip and planned to join him the next day. When he arrived at the hotel, he decided to send her a quick email. But he couldn't find the scrap of paper with her exact email address, so he did his best to remember it and typed it in from memory. Unfortunately, he got one letter wrong, and the email ended up going to an elderly preacher's wife whose husband had just passed away the day before. When the grieving widow checked her inbox, she read the message, let out a piercing scream, and collapsed on the floor. Her family rushed into the room and saw the email still open on the screen. It read, "Dearest wife, just checked in. Everything's ready for your arrival tomorrow. Your loving husband. By the way, it sure is hot down here." So a group of cowboys sat around a card table, arguing about who had the fastest draw. Finally, one rough-looking cowboy slammed his drink down and hollered, "Ain't no man faster than me. They call me Grim, 'cause I take more lives than the Reaper." A voice from across the saloon called back, "Well, I've been to both sides of the Mississippi and every other direction on the map. Ain't met a faster man than me. They call me Sixes, 'cause I can draw and fire off 6 rounds before most men can even get their gun out of their holster." After some hootin' and hollerin' and egging on by the patrons, the two decided to head outside to settle who was the fastest draw. Out in the dusty street, now lined on both sides with saloon patrons, they stood back to back, each taking 30 paces before turning to face each other. In a flash, before Grim even knew what had happened, Sixes drew his gun and unloaded all 6 rounds. Grim stood stunned, his hand still resting on his holstered gun. He hadn't been hit. Turning his head toward the commotion on the side of the street, Grim saw 6 men lying dead on the ground. He turned back to Sixes, who smirked. "I said I was the fastest. I never said nothing about accuracy." So an English tourist arrived in Texas. He stepped off the bus in Fort Worth and asked, "Where's a good place to eat?" A local replied, "Right down the road is a men's club." The tourist didn't realize that the club boasted a swimming pool, a workout room, indoor squash, and racquetball courts. He simply walked through the restaurant door and said to the waitress, "Miss, bring me a steak and a Coke." The waitress brought out a mug that was 12 inches wide and 1.5 feet tall. The man exclaimed, "I just wanted a Coke, not the whole factory." She responded, "Mister, this is Texas, and everything's bigger here." Soon, she returned with his steak, which overflowed on all sides of a massive, sizzling platter. He said, "Miss, I just wanted a steak, not the whole cow." "Again," she replied, "Mister, this is Texas, and everything's bigger here." After finishing his meal, he asked the waitress which way to the restroom. She directed him. "It's down the hall, 3rd door on the right." Distracted, the man turned into the 3rd door on the left instead, and with one step fell into the swimming pool. "Help! Help!" he screamed. "Don't flush it." So a wife decides to surprise her husband, Dave, by taking him to a strip club for his birthday. As they arrive, the doorman greets him. "Hey, Dave, how's it going?" The wife, looking puzzled, asks, "Have you been here before?" "Oh no," Dave replies quickly. "He's on my bowling team." They find a table, and a waitress comes over with a Budweiser. "Here's your usual, Dave," she says with a smile. Now the wife's eyebrow raises. "And how does she know you drink Budweiser?" She's in the ladies' bowling league. We share lanes sometimes," he explains nervously. Just then, a stripper comes over, throws her arms around Dave and says, "Hi, Davy. Want your usual table dance, big guy?" At this point, the wife's had enough. She grabs her purse, storms out of the club, and jumps into a cab. Dave rushes out and jumps in beside her before she can slam the door. He's trying to explain, insisting it's all a misunderstanding, but his wife is furious, shouting and calling him every name she can think of. The cab driver glances back and says, "Wow, Dave, you picked up a really angry old hag tonight." So a farmer had just bought a new rooster for his hens, and the old rooster, who had been around for years, was worried he'd be replaced. But he had a clever plan to deal with his young rival. He went up to the new rooster and said, "I'll make you a deal. Let's race for the hens, one lap around the farmhouse. If you win, I'll leave. If I win, you leave." The new rooster, much younger and confident, knew he could easily outrun the old-timer, so he agreed. However, the old rooster added, "Since I'm older, you should let me start halfway around the farmhouse before you begin. That way, it's fair." The younger rooster thought it was no problem and agreed. The race began. The old rooster set off, already huffing and puffing by the halfway mark. The young rooster bolted off like a rocket and quickly began closing the gap. By the time the old rooster reached 3/4 of the way, he was gasping for breath, barely holding on. The younger rooster was right behind him, just seconds from overtaking him. Suddenly, bam! The farmer's shotgun rang out. The young rooster collapsed in a heap of feathers. "Darn," the farmer muttered. "Third gay rooster this month." So a holy man visits the desert. He gets to the outpost at the edge and is greeted by the shopkeeper. "If you are going to the desert, my friend, you will need supplies, food and water, a tent for shelter at night." The holy man holds up his hands and declines. "I shall not take your wares, my friend. I shall instead pray to God, for God hears prayers and answers them." He sets off into the desert, and the sun beats down on him all day and dries his skin and eyes. Eventually, another traveler finds him and stops him. "It's a good job I found you. You're not far from death's door. Please, have some of my water and my food." The holy man declines. "I do not need your food or water, for I shall pray for these from God, and He will provide." God hears prayers and answers them. The holy man keeps going, his body now very weak and frail from all the heat. But now night is descending, and the cold winds howl at his sides. In the distance, 2 wolves are watching the holy man struggle through the dunes. Finally, thinks one of the wolves, "Our prayers have been answered." So one night, a blonde nun was praying in her room when God appeared before her. "My daughter, you have pleased me greatly. Your heart is full of love for your fellow creatures, and your actions and prayers are always for the benefit of others. I have come to you, not only to thank and commend you, but to grant you anything you wish," said God. "Dear Heavenly Father, I am perfectly happy and am doing what I love. I lack for nothing. I feel content in all ways," said the nun. "There must be something you would have of me," said God. "Well, there is one thing," she said. "Just name it," said God. "It's those blonde jokes. They are so demeaning to blondes everywhere, not just to me. I would like for blonde jokes to stop." "Consider it done," said God. "Blonde jokes shall be stricken from the minds of humans everywhere. But surely there is something that I could do just for you. There is one thing, but it's really small. and not worth your time, said the nun. Name it, please, said God. It's the M&Ms, said the nun. They're so hard to peel. So two guys are in a bar when an attractive woman walks in and sits down alone. The first guy boasts to the other that with his chat-up skills, he'll pick her up in a minute, no problem. He walks over and sits next to her, but returns a few minutes later, having been given a scornful brush off immediately. The second guy laughs at the first and says with his good looks and unfailing pickup skills, he'll have her on his arm and out the door pronto. A few minutes later, he returns red-faced, having been turned down abruptly. They sit there commiserating pitifully about how she must be gay or frigid or both. Just then, an average-looking guy walks in and sits down next to the woman, and a few minutes later they walk out together, arm in arm. The two guys realize the barman had been standing close to the woman, so they go over to see if they can find out why. Hey, fella, what did that guy say to that woman? He was her husband or boyfriend, right? The barman says, no, I don't think so. He had to introduce himself when he sat down. So what did he say? Well, said the barman, nothing special. He was just giving her the usual chat. She looked bored. Then he stuck out his tongue and licked his own eyebrows, and she dragged him off his stool and out the door. So a few guys were on a bike tour, but there weren't enough rooms in the hotel. No one wanted to room with Mick because he snored so badly. They decided it wasn't fair to make one of them stay with him the whole time, so they voted to take turns. The first guy slept with Mick and comes to breakfast the next morning with his hair a mess and his eyes all bloodshot. They said, man, what happened to you? He said. Mick snored so loudly I just sat up and watched him all night. The next night, it was a different guy's turn. In the morning, same thing, hair all standing up, eyes all bloodshot. They said, man, what happened to you? You look awful, he said. Man, that Mick shakes the roof with his snoring. I just sat up and watched him all night. The third night was Bill's turn. He was a tanned, older biker, a man's man. The next morning, he came to breakfast bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Good morning, he said. They couldn't believe it. All the guys asked, man, what happened? Bill replied, well, we got ready for bed. I went and tucked Mick in, patted him on the arse, and kissed him goodnight. Mick sat up and watched me all night. So the air traffic control tower suddenly lost communication with a small twin-engine aircraft. Moments later, the tower's landline rang. One of the employees answered. It was a passenger from the aircraft, calling from the pilot's mobile phone. He shouted, Mayday, Mayday. The pilot had a sudden, fatal heart attack. I grabbed his phone from his pocket. He told me before we took off that the tower was on speed dial. I'm at 18,000 feet, going 180 miles an hour, and I'm flying upside down. The tower employee quickly put the call on speaker and said, okay, stay calm, we've got you. We'll guide you down. Just answer a few questions. First, how do you know you're at 18,000 feet? The man yelled, it says 18,000 on the altimeter right in front of me. Good. And how do you know you're going 180 miles per hour? It says 180 on the airspeed indicator. Perfect. You're doing great. Now, it's completely overcast outside, so how do you know you're flying upside down? There was a pause. Then the man shouted, because the crap in my pants is running out of my shirt collar.
Through the great pencil bowl, Lawrence Lynn got a million stories untold. From green jokes, conspiracies, and edits with flair You gotta follow him, baby, if you dare. Your feed feels empty without his magic touch. You got the blues and the laughs that you crave so much. With a click and a follow, you'll find some relief. Lawrence Lynn's social media, a digital belief. Click, subscribe, don't miss a trick. Now, hey, leave your worries and come on, click today. Lawrence Lynn's got the content right in line. Follow him now.